The forbidden relic. The galaxy had many mysteries that no one dared to answer. But the most dangerous of them was the colossal alien statue that floated in the void near the dead star of Korath Prime. It was said to be older than the empires themselves, older even than the archives of the Venar or the living memory of the Skartil. The statue was massive, carved from a single piece of black stone that shimmered like liquid in starlight. It depicted a figure no one could identify, not quite humanoid, not quite alien. Its arms spread wide as though welcoming and warning at the same time. Every species in the galaxy knew of the statue, and every species told the same stories, that those who went too close never returned, that ships which tried to scan it melted from within their cores, that explorers who dared to touch its surface vanished without even a trace of distress signal. The Council had labeled the statue forbidden, and for generations it remained untouched, drifting slowly through the void as a reminder of powers beyond comprehension. To the cautious races this was enough. They believed that such relics were traps from the ancients' devices meant to punish the arrogant. Yet humanity had never been counted among the cautious. Races humans had only recently risen to join the great halls of the Galactic Council. But already their reputation was well known. They were explorers, fighters, risk-takers, and fools, depending on who one asked. They had climbed mountains that others thought unclimbable. They had sailed seas that others called endless. And now, staring into the abyss of space, they looked upon the alien statue not with fear, but with curiosity. Rumors spread quickly. A council patrol had detected a human vessel drifting near the statue, close enough to capture images in far greater detail than anyone else had managed. The images showed new carvings across the chest of the statue, strange glowing runes that shifted shape when recorded. The other empires called it madness to even approach that close, but for the humans it was proof that the statue had more to offer than fear. When the council convened to address this violation, the chamber was filled with anger. The Venar delegate hissed that humanity was reckless and would doom them all. The Skartil thundered that ancient relics were never meant to be touched. The smaller species trembled even at the mention of human presence near the statue. Yet among the noise, one truth became clear. No matter what threats or punishments were declared, the humans would not stop, because curiosity had already taken root. And humans were creatures who did not let go once they caught hold. The statue itself loomed in every mind, even those who had never seen it, with its carved eyes that seemed to follow ships, with its silence that echoed louder than any weapon. It became more than an object. It was a challenge, and challenges had a way of calling to humans in ways that frightened every other race alone. Human commander named Marcus Hale sat in the gallery listening to the accusations. He was not the most decorated of his kind, not a general, nor a diplomat. He was an engineer, one who had spent his life repairing things that others had abandoned. He had rebuilt engines thought to be scrap-revived ships left for dead, and on Earth he had once restored a cathedral clock that had been silent for centuries. To him, nothing was truly beyond repair or beyond understanding. The statue, to his eyes, was no curse, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. As the council debated, Marcus felt a fire in his chest. He could not explain it fully, but something about the statue felt like it was calling to him, not in words, not in visions, but in a sense of unfinished business, like a door left unlocked for too long. Every instinct told him that it was not simply death waiting inside, but a truth that had to be revealed. He knew the others would call him mad, but he also knew that madness was often the word used for those who stepped first into the unknown. Thus the stage was set. The galaxy feared the forbidden relic, while one human prepared to walk into its shadow. And the question that weighed upon every species was simple. What would happen when humanity did what no other species dared and touched the alien statue? Fear of the council. The council chamber had seen countless debates before wars declared and peace forged, trade agreements signed and broken, and endless speeches about honor and power. But nothing had unsettled its walls like the matter of the alien statue. The chamber was carved into a vast ring with seats for every recognized species, their banners hanging above in proud colors. Yet despite the familiar grandeur there was a heaviness in the air. The name of the statue alone was enough to stir uneasy delegates whispered in their own tongues as the great issue was brought to the floor, and one by one their voices rose. The Venar, who were tall insectoid beings with glass-like wings, were the first to speak. Their delegate reminded all present that the statue was listed among the galaxy's oldest taboos. He recited records that spoke of vanished fleets that had dared to probe too close. He spoke of the words, carved in forgotten archives, warning all who came after that this relic was not meant to be touched or studied. It was a relic of punishment. He said a weapon left by gods or demons meant to destroy those too arrogant to walk away. The Scartil followed their delegate, a hulking reptilian creature with scaled skin scarred from a lifetime of duels. He thundered that his people had legends of the statue passed down through generations. Legends that said those who looked upon it with desire were struck down by the stars themselves. He warned that any attempt to awaken what lay within would bring doom not just to humanity, but to the whole galaxy. Other voices joined. Some spoke with fear, some with anger, many with trembling uncertainty. The council chamber became a storm of sound as the debate stretched through hours and still no agreement formed. The smaller races begged for restrictions to be placed on humanity, declaring that one reckless act could wipe out 1,000 worlds. The elders of the gas-dwelling Ural spoke of omens and the shifting patterns of their homeworld's clouds, which they claimed warned of human folly. The aquatic Sarakai hissed that humanity's meddling would poison the currents of fate itself. Through it all, the humans sat silent. Their delegation was small compared to the empires who had ruled for millennia. They were newcomers, still treated with suspicion in many quarters, but silence did not mean weakness. Their representative listened, eyes steady as the storm raged, and when his time came, he rose to speak. He did not deny the danger. He did not pretend the statue was harmless. Instead, he asked a single question. If the statue was truly a relic of destruction, then why had it not destroyed the galaxy already? It had drifted for ages, unchanging, silent, and untouched. Perhaps it was not a curse at all. Perhaps it was waiting for something or someone. The chamber erupted again, half in anger, half in fear. For the thought that the statue might be waiting was far worse than believing it to be mindless destruction. If it waited, then it had purpose. If it had purpose, then it might still act. The very idea chilled the hearts of many in the gallery. Marcus Hale listened to every word he felt, the weight of their fear, and yet it only strengthened his resolve. He could not explain to them that humans did not see the world as they did. For the others, fear was a wall. For humans, fear was a mountain, and mountains were meant to be climbed. The statue was not a curse in his eyes. It was a mystery, and mysteries begged to be solved. As the debate dragged on, rumors reached the chamber of human ships already charting courses near the relic. The council roared in fury, demanding sanctions, demanding patrol fleets to guard the void. But the truth was clear. Humanity could not be controlled by threats of punishment. They had faced extinction on their own world countless times, from storms, famine, wars, and disasters. They had learned that survival came not from avoiding danger, but from meeting it head-on. That same spirit burned now, and it terrified the galaxy. When the session finally ended, the delegates left in anger and fear, whispering of doom and disaster. Yet in the quiet corners, others whispered something else. Not all species hated the humans. Some admired them secretly. Some wondered if perhaps the relic could indeed be answered by none but the reckless newcomers. And if that was true, then humanity's place in the galaxy was about to change forever. Marcus left the chamber with his decision already made. He would step forward, even if every species cursed his name, even if the galaxy itself turned against him. For if the statue was a test, then it was a test meant for him and for all humanity, and he would not allow it to remain unanswered. The human volunteer. The days following the council debate were filled with fear and fury across the galaxy. News networks replayed the arguments of the delegates with heavy emphasis on the warnings of doom. Merchants whispered about shutting trade routes near the Forbidden Zone, while military fleets repositioned themselves in quiet preparation for disaster. Entire worlds prayed to their gods that the statue would remain silent and untouched. Yet even as fear spread, There was one truth that every observer could not deny: the humans were not backing away. Marcus Hale stood aboard the human flagship Resolute, gazing out at the endless black of space. His decision weighed on him, but it did not crush him. For as long as he could remember, humanity had been drawn to the very things others fled from. On Earth, his ancestors had crossed seas in fragile wooden ships with no promise of land ahead. They had built machines to fly in skies where no creature was meant to soar. They had stepped onto a barren moon with little more than courage and stubbornness to guide them. To him, the statue was just another frontier, one more barrier to break. The Council had tried to forbid him. Entire fleets warned of sanctions against humanity, but none of their threats mattered to Marcus. He was not a general nor a politician. He was an engineer who had fixed broken machines all his life. His eyes saw problems waiting for solutions, not curses waiting for victims. To him, the statue was simply a machine built by hands that had once lived and worked. Even if those hands belonged to an ancient race far beyond imagining their work could still be understood. He called for volunteers among his crew. He did not order anyone to join him for this. It was not a mission of war but of discovery. The response surprised even him. More than half the crew stepped forward without hesitation. Some were young adventurers eager for glory. Others were scientists desperate to learn secrets lost for ages. Few were veterans who simply believed that if death came, it was better to face it with courage, rather than wait for it in fear. Marcus listened to each of them, and then made his choice. Only a small team would go, for he knew the danger was real, and he would not waste lives on reckless numbers. Back on the Council worlds, the decision spread like fire. The Scartil called him mad, and declared that they would not come to the rescue when his bones were scattered in the void. The Venar hissed that humanity would bring down punishment upon everyone if the relic awakened. But in secret corners, the whispers of admiration grew louder. Young species who had never dared to challenge the old orders began to speak of humans as pioneers, the kind of beings who would risk everything for knowledge or hope. Marcus prepared a shuttle, a small craft reinforced with human ingenuity. Layers of shielding and sensor nets were installed along its hull. Every possible precaution was taken, not because he expected them to save him, but because it was the duty of his team to try. He gave no grand speeches, for words were never his strength. Instead, he simply said that whatever waited inside the statue, it was better to know than to wonder, forever. The day of departure arrived. Broadcasts from across the galaxy tuned to the event. Millions watched from their homes on distant worlds, some in horror, some in awe, some in quiet envy. The shuttle detached from the Resolute and drifted into the dark toward the looming figure of the statue. Its black stone glimmered faintly under the distant light of the dead star, and its carved arms stretched wide as though welcoming the small craft closer. Inside the shuttle, silence reigned. Marcus sat at the controls, his hands steady though his heart thundered. The crew around him held their breath, not daring to speak, for every moment felt heavy with the weight of history. The statue grew larger and larger on their screens until it filled the view entirely. The surface shimmered with strange patterns that seemed to shift like waves across an ocean of stone. No one dared to blink for fear they might miss the instant of their doom. Yet as the shuttle passed the distance where so many others had vanished, nothing happened. No flames, no collapse, no curse. Instead, the statue seemed to hum with a sound too deep for ears, yet clear in the bones of every human aboard. Marcus felt it not as fear, but as recognition. The shuttle drifted. Closer still, and the runes carved upon the chest of the statue began to glow faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The galaxy watched, and the galaxy trembled. For the first time in all its long history, the forbidden relic was answering not with death, but with light. First contact with the statue. The shuttle drifted closer until the alien statue filled every corner of the viewport. Its immense size dwarfed their craft, and its surface shimmered with colors that no human eye had seen before. Marcus Hale sat at the controls, silent but calm. His hands rested firm and steady, for he knew hesitation now would mean failure. The crew behind him exchanged nervous glances, some clutching their harnesses, some whispering short prayers. They had all expected flames or instant destruction as the stories had promised. Instead, the air was heavy with an unknown power, a weight that pressed against their skin and filled their lungs with the sense of something vast and alive. Marcus guided the shuttle to a careful orbit around the chest of the statue. The glowing runes that had seemed faint from afar now burned bright in rhythmic pulses. Each flash ran along its carved lines as though energy coursed through veins of living stone. Every species in the galaxy had claimed the statue was cursed, yet what Marcus saw was a system awakening, as if recognizing a long-lost signal. The crew recorded everything, their instruments humming with confusion, for the energy fields defied every known law. One by one their devices overloaded, unable to process the complexity. Yet still Marcus continued forward. As the shuttle drew near to the statue's outstretched hand, the glow intensified. The figure seemed to lean toward them, though Marcus knew it was only the shifting perspective of their approach. Still, the illusion made his heart pound louder than before. He reached for the manual controls, bypassing the automated systems, and brought the shuttle within meters of the giant hand. The surface of the stone rippled like water, though no atmosphere surrounded it. It was as if the statue itself acknowledged their presence. Suddenly, the comm systems crackled, though no signal was transmitted. A deep resonance filled the cabin, a sound that was neither word nor music yet carried meaning. It pressed into their minds as a call not of warning but of recognition. Marcus closed his eyes for an instant and let the vibration settle in his chest. He felt no malice, only expectation. The crew looked to him with wide eyes, and for the first time he spoke a single phrase, not to them but to the statue. "We are here." The runes flared with sudden brilliance, lighting the void as though a new star had been born. The council fleets watching from distant, sensors erupted in alarm, broadcasting warnings across every channel. Some declared that this was the end, others demanded immediate retreat. But Marcus ignored them, for what he saw on his screens was not destruction. Instead, a seam appeared along the chest of the statue, lines of light tracing a doorway that had never been recorded before. Slowly, the stone shifted, opening a path into the heart of the relic. The shuttle trembled as waves of unknown energy swept around it. The hull creaked and the instrument screamed in protest, yet the ship held steady. Marcus pushed the controls forward, guiding them into the opening. No one spoke. Not even a whisper, for every soul aboard knew they had just crossed a threshold that no species had dared to approach before. Inside the statue, the darkness was complete until the shuttle's lights revealed vast walls lined with carvings. Each carving depicted scenes of beings not unlike humans, tall and strong with faces obscured, yet their actions were clear. They reached for stars. They built towers that touched the heavens. They battled storms, and they endured. Marcus stared at the images. His heart racing, for the figures felt familiar, as though they carried a message across endless ages, meant only for his eyes. The crew gasped as the walls responded to their light, shifting and rearranging like living murals. The runes reformed into new shapes that none of their translation software could decipher. Yet Marcus understood without words. The statue was not meant to kill, it was meant to wait for the right touch, and now it had awakened. From the outside, the galaxy watched in disbelief. The forbidden relic had opened to a human, and only to a human. Entire fleets remained frozen there, weapons ready yet powerless before what they witnessed. Generations of fear and legend crumbled in that instant, replaced by something far more dangerous. The unknown had chosen, and it had chosen humanity. Marcus guided the shuttle deeper into the statue until the passage opened into a vast chamber. Its ceiling rose higher than any cathedral on Earth, and at its center stood a pedestal carved from the same black stone. A sphere hovered above it, glowing with the same heartbeat rhythm as the runes on the statue's chest. The crew stared in awe, none daring to approach until Marcus unstrapped himself and stood tall. His voice was steady, though his body trembled with the weight of history. He said to his team, "This is what we came for, and this is why no one else could enter. The statue was waiting for us. The statue awakens. The chamber within the statue pulsed with light that seemed alive. The glow from the sphere at its center cast shifting patterns across the walls that danced like rivers of fire. The crew of the shuttle stood frozen, caught between awe and terror. Every breath they took felt heavy, as if the air itself was thicker than normal. Marcus Hale stepped forward, each footfall echoing, though no sound should have carried in the vacuum. His hand twitched near his belt, not to reach for a weapon, but to steady himself against the weight of the moment. For in his heart he felt certain that what stood before them was not a trap, but a key. The pedestal rose higher as though sensing his approach. The sphere rotated slowly, glowing brighter with every step. Marcus took. His crew whispered warnings, but none dared hold him back. They had seen the runes respond to his presence, and they knew that something beyond their understanding had chosen him alone. Marcus reached the edge of the pedestal and lifted his hand. The light flared in response, as though it recognized not just his presence but his intent. For the first time in recorded history, the forbidden relic responded with welcome rather than violence. The moment his hand touched the sphere, a surge of energy poured through his body. His vision blurred and the chamber dissolved into light. He no longer stood in the shuttle or within stone walls. Instead, he drifted in an endless expanse of stars. A figure emerged from the brilliance, tall and faceless, its body formed of shifting light. It did not speak with words, yet Marcus understood it perfectly. The message was not delivered to his ears but burned into his mind. It told him that the statue was no monument of death, but a sentinel, created by a race older than all others, a race that had seen the rise and fall of galaxies and had left behind guardians waiting for those who would endure. The figure showed Marcus images of countless worlds consumed by fire and storm, civilizations, rose to greatness only to collapse when fear bound them or arrogance blinded them. Yet through all the cycles of creation and ruin, there remained a hope that one species would be strong enough to face fear, not by avoiding it, but by enduring it. The statue had been left to watch and to wait. Its silence had been its test. Every species that had recoiled from it had failed. Only those who dared to reach for it without retreat would prove worthy. Marcus felt his chest tighten as the truth became clear. Humanity was that species. Back in the chamber, the crew saw Marcus stand rigid, his hand pressed to the sphere. The light burned so bright they feared it would consume him, but still he remained alive. They shouted to him, but his eyes were distant, his mind far away. When at last the light dimmed, Marcus staggered back, his breath heavy, his skin pale but his eyes alight with fire. He told them what he had seen, though he struggled to find words to capture the enormity of it. The statue was not a curse, it was a gateway, and humanity had opened it. Outside the statue, the galaxy reeled. Council fleets transmitted frantic messages demanding the humans withdraw. Some captains threatened to fire upon the shuttle if it did not retreat, yet even their threats trembled with hesitation. For they knew that to fire upon the humans now was to declare war not with humanity, but with whatever force lay behind the relic. The balance of power had shifted, and all could feel it. As Marcus steadied himself, the pedestal before him changed. The sphere cracked open like an egg of light, revealing a crystal core that hovered in the air. Its surface reflected not stone but moving stars and entire galaxies contained within. A quiet hum filled the chamber, not menacing but warm like the sound of a heartbeat. Marcus reached out again, his fingers brushing the core, and instantly data poured into the shuttle's systems. Streams of knowledge that bypassed their failing instruments and embedded directly into human storage drives. Schematics, histories, star maps, technologies older than empires, all flooding into their records. The crew gasped in disbelief as screens filled with symbols that no alien software had ever cracked, but which now arranged themselves into forms understandable to human minds. It was as if the relic had been designed with them in mind alone. They realized the truth with a shiver of fear and pride. Humanity had been chosen not because they were the most advanced or the strongest, but because they were the only ones reckless enough to try. Marcus looked upon the crystal as if it were both a gift and a burden. For he knew the knowledge it carried could change the galaxy forever. It could lift humanity to heights beyond imagination, but it could also bring chaos if misused. He turned to his crew, his voice steady though his heart was heavy. He told them that what they held now was more than power. It was responsibility, and the decision of how to use it would not be his alone but humanity's as a whole. The chamber pulsed one final time as though acknowledging his words, and then the crystal dimmed its light, settling into quiet rest. The runes along the walls faded, leaving the chamber still and silent. Once more, the shuttle systems returned to normal as if nothing had happened at all. Yet every soul aboard knew that everything had changed. The forbidden relic was awake, and it had chosen its heirs. The hidden message. The shuttle floated within, the heart of the statue silent as the crew struggled to understand the weight of what had just taken place. The crystal core hovered in front of Marcus Hale, its light dim but steady, as though it had completed its task, and now rested like a guardian. At ease, Marcus's hands trembled slightly, though his face remained calm. He knew that what he had seen was not simply vision, but knowledge given deliberately. The crew gathered around their screens as streams of alien script continued to pour through the systems. Yet unlike any language encountered before, the lines rearranged themselves into words and symbols that human minds could follow. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the data as it unfolded. The message began not with threats, but with history. It told of a race so ancient that even the oldest galactic archives carried only myths about them. They called themselves the Architects, a people who had wandered the stars before. Most current worlds had even cooled into form. The Architects had built wonders so vast, entire species mistook them for natural phenomena. Nebulae shaped into living engines, moons carved into libraries, suns rearranged to burn for eternity. But with their brilliance came their downfall, for they had trusted that greatness alone could preserve them. And when a wave of destruction swept across the galaxy, they could not endure. The Architects had left behind guardians in the form of statues, each one carrying fragments of their knowledge and a test for those who came after. They believed that only a species strong enough to overcome fear would be able to rise where they had fallen. The statue Marcus had touched was one of these guardians, and the crystal was a key, a message, a final hope passed down through ages. The words glowed across the human screens, declaring that the statues would remain locked until the right inheritors arrived. The test was simple: approach without fear. Endure the silence and dare to touch what others would flee. Only then would the knowledge awaken. The crew exchanged glances as the realization settled over them. The Architects had not chosen the strongest warriors or the oldest empires. They had chosen humanity because humanity had no instinct to turn away. Their history was filled with reckless voyages and stubborn defiance of danger. They had survived not by avoiding storms, but by walking into them and refusing to bow. Marcus felt both pride and burden weigh upon him, for in his heart, he understood that this choice was not blessing alone. It was responsibility. Humanity had been named heir to a legacy that had broken the mightiest of races. The message continued, showing visions of hidden caches scattered across the galaxy. Each statue was a beacon, each one containing pieces of knowledge that together would form the complete legacy of the Architects. The fragments were dangerous, some containing weapons that could unravel stars, others carrying sciences that could heal entire planets. The message warned that the knowledge must not be wielded by those who sought only conquest or control. It spoke of balance, of survival, of enduring through hardship, not ruling through fear. Marcus understood that these were not simple gifts. They were trials. Humanity had opened the first door, but many more remained. The crew sat in silence as the implications grew heavier. One asked softly if humanity was ready for such a burden. Marcus gave no easy answer. He admitted that humanity had its flaws, that they had fought wars among themselves and often chosen pride over peace. Yet he also reminded them that humanity's greatest strength lay not in perfection, but in resilience. They fell, and they rose again. They suffered, and they learned. They endured where others surrendered. That was why the statue had responded to them. Outside the statue, the galaxy's fleets continued to monitor the humans. The Council transmitted desperate warnings demanding withdrawal and threatening action, but none dared fire a single shot. For what if the humans carried the wrath of the architects now? What if harming them awakened a power none could resist? Fear rippled across the stars as empires whispered of humanity's rise. Some cursed. Their name others watched with cautious hope. Marcus turned from the glowing screens to face his team. His voice carried steady resolve. He told them that what they carried was not his alone, not theirs alone, but the weight of all humankind. The choice of how to use this knowledge would define not just their future, but the place of humanity in the galaxy. He felt the presence of the architects lingering in the crystal, as though waiting to see if their choice had been right. The message ended with a final line that burned brighter than all others. It said that the heirs would not be measured by how they seized power, but by how they carried the burden. Humanity had proven themselves worthy to begin, but the true test was only just beginning. Marcus closed his eyes for a long moment, then whispered that he accepted the burden, for he knew that humanity could not turn back now. They had touched the unknown and been chosen, and there was no path but forward, humanity's choice. The moment Marcus Hale and his crew stepped out of the alien statue, the galaxy seemed different, as if the stars themselves had shifted in response to what had been awakened. The crystal core no longer hovered before him, but had merged with the human shuttle, its light pulsing gently as though alive. The crew exchanged glances filled with awe and unspoken questions. Each of them felt the weight of the architect's legacy pressing upon their shoulders. Yet it was not a crushing weight, but a challenge, a call to rise above what humanity had ever known. The Council fleet still hovered at a distance, their weapons trained but unmoved. Humanity had touched the forbidden, and nothing had stopped them. They had faced the unknown without fear. And the galaxy had noticed the aliens who had once whispered threats now whispered wonder. The humans had opened a door that no species dared approach before, and the echoes of their courage rippled through every corner of inhabited space. Marcus walked to the bridge of the shuttle and touched the console that had received the crystal. The alien script began to dissolve into knowledge comprehensible to humans for the first time. The crew saw schematics of ships, faster than any they had built, hints of technologies that could harness stars and energies that could cure planets. The architects had left behind not just tools, but visions, a blueprint of what a civilization could become if it endured and persevered, without losing sight of compassion and wisdom. A question lingered in the minds of all aboard. How should they use this power? Would they rise as conquerors or as protectors? Marcus looked at his team and knew that the answer lay not in what the architects had given, but in what humans chose for themselves. The legacy was a mirror. It revealed not just possibilities, but truths about those who inherited it. Humanity had been reckless in their past, brave and foolish, but now they faced a chance to be more. Outside the shuttle, the stars seemed to shimmer with anticipation. The alien fleets watched silently, waiting to see the actions of the humans who had dared to touch what they feared. Marcus made a decision. He addressed his crew, and his voice carried through the cabin, calm and certain. They would share this knowledge carefully. They would use it to protect, not destroy, to heal, not dominate. Every cache of the architects would be approached with respect. Every fragment studied and understood before it was used. Humanity would rise, but not as tyrants or masters of fear, but as guardians who honored the gift they had been given. As they prepared to leave the sector, Marcus felt a surge of something ancient and vast. It was as if the architects themselves had watched and nodded approvingly. The knowledge within the shuttle began to resonate with human intent, and for the first time the light of the crystal became steady, warm and welcoming. The shuttle lifted off, and the stars stretched before them, each one a promise, each one a path to exploration. They were no longer mere inhabitants of a cornered planet. They were inheritors of a legacy older than most civilizations, and the galaxy would have to reckon with humanity in a new way. The crew looked at Marcus and each other and smiled for the first time in weeks. They had faced fears that would have broken lesser species. They had touched the unknown and returned transformed, and they knew that the journey ahead would be unlike anything they had imagined. Their first step was just the beginning, a commitment to discover, learn, and protect. The galaxy waited, and humans were ready to meet it head-on with courage, resilience, and a stubborn refusal to bow to fear. As they jumped into faster-than-light travel, Marcus whispered quietly to himself that humanity had done what no one else dared. They had embraced the unknown and found themselves stronger than any empire, any council, any weapon could have predicted. They were the species that walked into the forbidden and turned it into opportunity. They were the species the architects had chosen, and they would prove worthy, not by domination, but by endurance, and the choices they would make from now on would shape the future for all life. And so, humanity's journey began not as conquerors, but as a force that could change the galaxy, not through fear but through courage, through curiosity, through the unyielding heart that no species had yet matched. No empire could erase what had been done. No threat could undo what had been earned. They were humans, and they had touched the forbidden, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity's legacy. The shuttle drifted silently through the endless darkness of space, yet the emptiness felt alive, as if the stars themselves were watching. Marcus Hale and his crew felt the weight of what they had done, pressing gently against their minds, not as fear, but as recognition. The alien statue now lay behind them, a silent witness to the species that had dared where none else had gone. Humans had touched it, and something within them had changed forever. The air inside the cabin was filled with anticipation, curiosity, and a quiet reverence for the unknown that they had embraced without hesitation. Each member of the crew remembered the first moment they had laid hands on the statue, the strange vibrations, the pulse of light that had traveled up their arms, the knowledge that had seeped into their minds in flashes, images of civilizations long gone and technologies that bent reality. They had been frightened and exhilarated at the same time, but they had endured, and their endurance had become their strength. Their courage had not been reckless. It had been a choice, a declaration that humans would not be bound by fear or limitation. As the shuttle navigated through the asteroid fields and nebulae of uncharted space, the crystal core within the cabin glowed steadily, and the knowledge of the architects seemed to resonate with their intentions. The crew realized that the gift was more than technology. It was a test, a challenge, and a key. Humanity had been chosen, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they were curious, daring, and unafraid to face the consequences of their own actions. The galaxy had watched, and now it had to respect the species that had turned hesitation into opportunity and fear into discovery. Marcus walked to the viewing port and stared at the swirling colors of a distant nebula. The light reflected in his eyes, and for a moment he imagined all the species that had come and gone, all the civilizations that had risen and fallen, and wondered what humans would leave behind. They were not invincible, nor were they flawless, but they were relentless. Their spirit could not be contained by walls or weapons or warnings. They had touched the forbidden and returned, carrying not destruction but potential, and the potential was limitless. The crew began to plan their journey home, yet their minds were alive with visions of the future. They would share the knowledge responsibly, teach others to respect the power they had discovered, and ensure that the galaxy understood that humanity's touch was not one of conquest, but of courage. The alien fleets that had once shadowed them now observed silently, curious not of how humans might be stopped, but of how they might rise. The humans had rewritten the rules without speaking a word, without striking a blow, simply by daring to act, where others only watched. The crystal pulsed in harmony with human intent, and it seemed to whisper secrets of distant worlds, of stars that could be harnessed, and energies that could heal entire planets. Marcus felt a surge of hope as he realized that the future of humanity would not be written by fear or by limitation, but by the choices they would make each day, the courage they would show, and the compassion they would extend. They were no longer a simple species confined to a small planet. They were explorers, guardians, pioneers, the inheritors of a legacy that could shape the destiny of countless civilizations. And as the shuttle jumped into faster-than-light travel, the stars stretched into streaks of brilliance, and the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Humanity had touched the forbidden and had been transformed. They had shown that the unknown was not to be feared but to be embraced. They had proven that courage and curiosity could overcome the limits imposed by fear and by tradition. And in the hearts of Marcus and his crew burned the knowledge that whatever challenges awaited humanity, whatever dangers lurked among the stars, they would face them not with hesitation, but with the unyielding resolve that had always defined their species. Humans had dared, humans had endured. Humans had risen, and the galaxy would never forget the species that had touched the forbidden and changed everything. The end,